The All Progressive Congress and the People's Democratic Party are among the parties that are yet to submit their audit reports from the last general election. However, the Independent National Electoral Commission said it had prepared forms that would make the process easier to track expenditures and had also trained auditors from the registered political parties. The Commissioner's Director, Election and Party Monitoring, Aminu Idris, disclosed this in Lagos at a two-day capacity building workshop for journalists on critical issues in the Electoral Act 2022 and the Commission's processes, innovations, preparations for the 2023 general elections. Now, to discuss these issues is Professor Tukur Hussaini. He's a lecturer at the Department of Public Administration, Nasarawa State University. Good morning and welcome to DAYBREAK.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Prof. Today appears to be the day for the professors, clearly. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
I'm sure you have followed the issue of election spending very critically as it affects our national polity, the need to put a ceiling to how much is spent on election, more so to also encourage everyone to be able to get into that space and not exclusively make it a preserve of the rich.
Yes.
And today we are seeing that the major players in this space in the last 22 years are finding it difficult to even render an account of their public spending, especially during elections. How significant do you think this is to the whole objective of having a credible, free and fair elections?
Thank you very much. It's very important that when you are participating in a political contest, to determine the parameters of the context, especially in terms of finances, because of the experience we have in the country, in which in the past, especially during the Second Republic and the Third Republic, where money bags hijacked political parties and determined to a large extent who will be the contestant and the outcome of the results. So that's very important. Even today, we have those challenges. For instance, who controls the political parties? It is clear from what we have seen so far that at the state level, irrespective of any political party, the governors are the money bags, they determine the delegates, they determine the process, and they determine the outcome of the election. So there must be a law that clearly indicates who are the owners of the political party, how a political party raises its money, how it spends its money, and that will sanitize the polity and bring a context in which all participants will be satisfied as to the fairness and the outcome of the election. That is very important. And more so, we have an electoral law that has been enacted in this year. The Electoral Act 2022 has clearly specified those aspects. For instance, Section 85, clearly says how a political party, what are the process of a political party should raise its fund, who should donate, what should be the limit of the donation, how the party should spend the money in terms of acquiring assets, in terms of management of election, in terms of auditing and submission of the audited expenses, 3 months, 6 months after the election, and so on and so forth. So it's a welcome development. More so, the law clearly gives INET the responsibility of limiting the amount of money that a political party can spend in a particular election. For instance, contestant, in the case of the presidential election, no party, no candidate will have the power of exceeding 5 billion naira in terms of electioneering. At the state level, the governor will have only 1 billion to spend. The senators will have only 100 million, while the House of Reps 70 million. The State House of Assembly 30 million, chairman of the local government 30 million, and then councillor 5 million. it is a limit. But how do you monitor those limits? It's very essential. The law also stipulates that no political party, no individual shall donate more than 50 million naira to a political party. And there should be no anonymous donation. And even if there are, this should be declared. So these are some of the innovation that we believe will assist in reducing. But the main question that we shall ask is that how do we monitor this? More so that this money do not pass through the normal process. The political parties do not have accountability and transparency process in their accounting system. And that INEC is trying to build that.
Talking about,
go ahead.
Talking about INEC, do you think INEC is ready to actually implement, monitoring election spendings?
I should say it should be ready. And that readiness requires a long process. More so that the law has just been promulgated. Some of the provisions you have to take time by building capacity, by also creating monitoring and evaluation devices in collaboration with security agencies, corruption fighting agency, and so on and so forth. But one important thing is that there are some sections of the provision of the law which ought to take place now. For instance, the limitation in terms of how much a party spends. The law clearly indicates that INEC should do that in collaboration. And how do INEC set up a mechanism of doing that? How do we check? Because political parties are public institutions, and therefore their accounts should also be open to the public. How do INEC go about in this regard to ensure that the accounts are transparent and that any individual can have the ability to see the sources of income of the party and how those money are spent, and how, if return, can challenge whether the return is accurate or not. These are some of the important things.
So, Prof, in following up with what Zainab has said with regards to INEC ability, I think she asked that question clearly because from what we are seeing from the onset, it does appear that that capacity is challenged. We have seen what appears to be a covert way of raising funds by the party by pegging funds purchased at a very outrageous rate. And then we saw all kinds of people pretending to want to be part of the presidential race and pumping money into the party just to answer the name of a presidential contestant, and in the last minute some of them didn't even show up where the collation of names were happening. However, those huge sums had practically gone into the coffers, and they came in under studio names. Well, the law says no anonymous spending, but they just come up with a name and then push that huge amount of money into the coffers of the political parties. And these have not been checked. We have not seen any statement from INEC questioning those kind of money or even warehousing them or putting any kinds of peg in place. So the real question is, INEC seem to be distracted by everything that is going on around what appears to be one of the most interesting elections in our democratic history. There are issues of over 800,000 persons who are on the list of election defaulters that they are grappling with how to try, and in that case they are even submitting a bill to create a different arm to try them. And now they have to grapple with monitoring these all-powerful political parties. So truly, how much of a capacity exists therein to be able to rein in these political parties?
First of all, there is no law that says a political party should not raise funds from the candidates. But there is a moral question of how much you can raise. And this one, we cannot answer it because it pricks the conscience not only of the leaders of the political party, but the whole society as to how much should be raised as money for the purchase of just
expression.
Yes. Two is that since a party can raise such huge amount, and that INEC is yet to determine, based on electoral law, how much a political party should spend in a political contest. That gives the party more opportunity to spend as much as they can from the money they realize. But if there is stipulation, for instance, a party realizes 22 billion out of show of interest, and then the limit of expenditure, for instance, in a presidential candidate is 1 billion. And that is not to say that that limitation is on the party, but on the candidate. How do you reconcile that? Meaning that the party can spend more because the law is only on the individual presidential candidate rather than the party. So there is a contradiction in this regard. And that applies also to other limitations already put by the law in terms of gubernatorial, National Assembly and other contests. So it is a gray area that not only INEC and the political parties should sit and determine, but there is need also to amend the law in future so that those gray areas can be resolved. For instance, there are fines. For instance, in terms of return, shortly after, for instance, a party has concluded an election, within 3 months, the party is supposed to indicate the sources of its income, the liability, the assets, and the sources of the expenditure within 6 months. But in the case of a candidate, the party is supposed to submit the expenditure, the sources of the expenditure within 3 months. This we know so far. No party has done in the past, and no party is even ready to do that because the structure of the political party in terms of their accountability is not clear. So INEC may be challenged after the election to say, for instance, how do we determine how much a party has spent and how to, for instance, make a return in terms of its assets, in terms of its ability, in terms of sources of its income, and in terms of expenditure. Not only the expenditure, but even the management of the election. Because the management of the election is different. And we all know in Nigeria, it's not the party that manages election, but the candidates manage election in their constituency. So in that regard, do we ask the candidate to account, or do we ask the party to account? These are also areas that need clarification. And that to do that, that's why I say it will be going to be a long process, because INEC has to be equipped. It has to build up by providing necessary skill, by building people, auditors that are outside even the parties, and those that are inside the party. And then the auditing process, the auditing system should also be something different, because we have auditing laws that determine how public and the private sector should account, but which one do we offer to a political party? It's also another important aspect.
You know, there's also another questions that people are asking is about how much candidates know about the laws in the Electoral Act surrounding election spending. A lot of people are saying, do these candidates actually even know what the law says about election spending?
I'm sure a substantial number may not have even raised the document to look at the provisions. And that applies also to many of our leaders who happen to be in power. For instance, I should express my doubt if, for instance, I'm told that one of our governors never read the Constitution from page 1 to the last. Our ministers, our House of Rep member, I should not be in doubt.
Finally,
why I'm saying so is that we need to understand that our laws are not decorations.
True.
They are meant to be obeyed, and they are also meant to be implemented. Yes.
Finally, your last thoughts, because we are running out of time. what is the place of the EFCC and the ICPC in all of this? We saw them during the primaries checking handbags to see whether people are carrying dollars. I wonder if it is that kind of opaque tracking that we need, or we need something, a bit more sophisticated if we need to trace the money back.
Then I think that was a symbolic gesture for people to know and understand that they are around.
They are watching.
But the expenditure within the normal accounting system is easy to track.
Okay.
But we also know that our political parties are ingenious to the extent that the expenditure they make may not be traced. But it is the duty and responsibility of the ICPC, the EFCC, and as well as the INEC, based on the provision of the law, as well as non-governmental organization, to expose all those things that may happen during the electioneering campaign and the conduct of the election and the election day. These are very important. And it's a long process. We are just beginning, and we hope and pray that in the future we'll have a free and fair election that will be acceptable to all Nigerians.
Interesting perspective there from Professor Tukur of the Nasarawa State University. It's a pleasure to have had you in the studio, provide this enlightenment and education for Nigeria and for Nigerians.
Thank you very much.